There is a moment most people never talk about. You are in a meeting, or at dinner, or in the middle of a conversation that actually matters to you, and you have something to say. You know exactly what you think. The idea is clear in your head. You can feel the weight of it. But when you open your mouth, something happens. The words come out wrong, or they come out flat, or they disappear completely, and the moment passes, and someone else fills the space, and the room moves on, and you sit there, fully aware of everything you wanted to say, still carrying it. And the frustrating part is that this happens more than once. It keeps happening. In job interviews, in performance reviews, in conversations with people you love, in moments where saying the right thing would have changed something real. You are not confused about what you believe. You are not lacking intelligence. You have thought about this. You have prepared for situations like this. But there is still this gap between what you understand inside and what actually comes out when it counts. Here's what I want to ask you, and I want you to sit with it for a while before we try to answer it. Why do so many smart, capable, deeply aware people struggle to be heard? Not just understood, heard, felt, taken seriously. Why does communication fail, not for people who don't know things, but for people who know exactly what they want to say and still can't seem to make it land? That question has a real answer, but it's not the one most people expect. Most of us were never taught how to communicate. We were taught how to speak. There is a difference. We learned grammar. We learned to read. We learned how to structure a sentence. Some of us took a public speaking class somewhere in high school, spent a few minutes in front of a class, and called it done. But no one ever sat us down and explained the invisible dynamics happening inside every conversation. No one explained why some people walk into a room and immediately earn trust, why some people can say something simple and everyone leans in, why others can have the perfect argument, the perfect credentials, the perfect logic, and still walk away feeling like they were never really in the room. We assumed that communication was mostly about vocabulary, about confidence, about having the right thing to say. So when things went wrong, we blamed ourselves for not being articulate enough, or not being assertive enough, or not being naturally charismatic. But that framing was wrong from the start. There is a book called Speak Smart, Master the Psychology of Powerful Communication. And what it does, more than anything else, is shift the question. It stops asking, how do you speak better, and starts asking, why does communication break down in the first place? And when you look at it from that angle, everything changes. This is not a book about tips. It is not about speaking techniques or vocal exercises or 10 phrases that make you sound more confident. It goes underneath all of that. It looks at the psychology of what is really happening in every conversation, the hidden fears, the invisible signals, the patterns running quietly in the background that shape whether you connect or whether you don't. Think about the last time you hesitated before saying something important. Maybe it was in a meeting and you had an idea but waited to see if someone smarter sounding would speak first. Maybe it was in a relationship and you felt something clearly but told yourself it wasn't the right time. Maybe it was in a job interview and you knew the answer but second-guessed yourself at the last second. That hesitation has a name. It is not shyness. It is not lack of confidence the way people usually mean it. It is something more specific. It is the fear of being seen and getting it wrong. Most people, when they think about communication anxiety, think about the act of speaking, the dry mouth, the racing heart, the forgetting words. But that physical experience is just the surface. Underneath it is a deeper calculation the mind is running. If I say this and it lands wrong, what does that say about me? People are not afraid of speaking. They are afraid of the judgment that follows. And because the brain has no way to predict exactly how something will land, it does the next best thing. It holds back. It delays. It edits down to almost nothing. I've seen this happen in really accomplished people, not just people who are new to a field or unsure of themselves, people with years of experience, people who know more about a topic than almost anyone in the room. But the moment they have to say something in front of others, a different part of them takes over. And that part is running a very old program. A program built not on facts, but on the fear of social rejection. This is where the book begins. Not with technique, but with this. Most communication problems are not intellectual problems, they are emotional ones. And until you understand what emotion is driving the behavior, no technique will actually fix it. The person who speaks too fast is not unaware of pacing, they are anxious, and the speed is a release valve. The person who over-explains is not confused about clarity, they are afraid that one explanation won't be enough. The person who stays quiet is not lacking words, they are protecting themselves from a risk that feels very real even if no one else can see it. This is the foundation. Communication is not just about the words, it is about what is happening inside the person before, during, and after those words are spoken.
Here is something that catches most people off guard. The biggest communication problem in most people's lives is not that they speak poorly, it is that they don't actually listen, not in the way they think they do. You are in a conversation, the other person is talking, and your eyes are on them, and you are nodding, and from the outside it looks like you are fully present. But inside something else is happening. You are formulating your response. You are thinking about the point you want to make when they stop talking. You are comparing what they're saying to something that happened to you. You are deciding whether you agree or disagree. You are performing listening. You are not actually doing it. And the other person can feel this, not always consciously, but there is a shift in the quality of connection, a kind of distance, a sense that they are speaking into space. And this matters more than most people realize, because real listening is one of the most psychologically powerful things you can do in a conversation, not as a strategy, not as a trick, but as an actual act of presence. When you genuinely listen to someone, without preparing your reply, without evaluating what they say, without waiting for your turn, something different happens. The other person becomes more open. They feel safe. And when people feel safe, they say truer things. They stop performing too. And suddenly the conversation moves into a different register entirely. Think about the last conversation where you felt truly heard, not agreed with, not advised, just heard. Most people have to think for a while before they can come up with one, because it is genuinely rare. And because it is rare, it is powerful. The book makes a point here that I think about a lot. Most people are listening at level 1. They hear the words, but there are deeper levels. Level 2 is listening to the meaning behind the words. Level 3 is listening to the emotional state underneath the meaning. The person who communicates at that third level does not just understand what you said, they understand what you needed to say. That is not a gift some people are born with. It is a skill. And it starts with slowing down enough to actually be in the conversation instead of running parallel to it.
There is something specific that happens when you rush to fill silence. You are in a negotiation and you just made your ask, or you are in a difficult conversation and you just said something real. And then there is a pause, a few seconds of quiet, and almost every instinct in you says to fill it, to add something, to soften it, to explain further, to say something that takes the pressure down a notch. And almost always, that instinct is wrong. Silence in conversation is not empty. It carries weight. It signals something. It gives the other person room to actually process what was said. And it communicates something about you, that you are settled, that you are not afraid of the pause, that you don't need to rush. I didn't understand this clearly for a long time. I thought that filling silence was courtesy, that it was keeping things moving, but it is actually often the opposite. Filling silence prematurely is a form of anxiety management. It is your discomfort looking for an exit. And when you remove that exit, when you sit in the pause, the other person is the one who often speaks next. And what they say in that moment is usually more honest than what they would have said if you had jumped in. This works in hard conversations. It works in professional settings. It works in places where you are trying to understand what someone actually thinks, not just what they are willing to offer quickly. The book frames silence as a form of communication, not the absence of it. And once you start seeing it that way, you use it completely differently. You start pausing after you say something important instead of immediately qualifying it. You start waiting out uncomfortable moments instead of rushing to resolve them. You start understanding that the most powerful communicators are not the ones who fill every space. They're the ones who know which spaces to leave empty.
Most people approach this from the wrong direction. They think, if I appear more confident, people will respond better to me. So they work on posture. They try to speak louder. They practice not saying They rehearse things in the mirror. And some of that helps, but it is working on the surface of something whose real structure is underneath. Here is what is actually happening. The way others perceive you in a conversation is less about what you deliberately project and more about what you unconsciously believe about yourself. Your internal state leaks out in ways you cannot fully control or fake. The slight hesitation before you speak, the way you hold eye contact or break it, the speed at which you recover when you lose your train of thought, whether you laugh when nervous, whether you apologize before you've done anything wrong. These are not performance choices. They are expressions of something you already believe about whether you belong in the conversation, whether what you have to say is worth saying, whether you expect to be taken seriously. And other people read these signals constantly, not always consciously, but they do. And their response to you is shaped by them far more than by the actual content of what you say. Think about two people saying the exact same sentence, same words, same room, but one of them says it from a place of internal steadiness. The other says it from a place of needing approval. The sentence reads completely differently. The room responds completely differently. This is why communication work that only addresses the external never fully lands. You can rehearse the perfect thing to say and still walk out of a conversation feeling like it didn't work, because the words were right, but something underneath them was still shaky. The book asks a harder question than most communication books do. It asks you to look at what you actually believe about your own voice, not what you wish you believed, not what you tell people, what you actually quietly believe about whether what you say matters. And for a lot of people, that belief has a long history. It formed in early classrooms where speaking up felt dangerous, in family dynamics where certain feelings were not allowed to exist, in social environments where fitting in required shrinking. That history does not disappear just because you are an adult now and the stakes are different, but it can shift, slowly, with attention, and that shift changes everything that comes after.
There is a version of communication that is about getting what you want. And there is a version that is about creating understanding. Most people think they're doing the second one when they're actually doing the first. Performing communication looks like a lot of things. Over-explaining, trying too hard to sound certain, choosing words designed to impress rather than connect, listening only long enough to find your opening, agreeing when you don't agree because disagreement feels risky. And the strange thing is that performing communication often fails to achieve even what it is trying to achieve, because the other person, even when they cannot identify exactly what is happening, can sense that something is off, that you're working an angle, that the connection is not quite real. Real influence works differently. It comes from understanding what the other person actually needs from the conversation, not just what they are asking for. What they need, what they are hoping will happen, what they are afraid won't. And it comes from being willing to actually address that, not to manipulate it, not to appear like you're addressing it, but to genuinely meet it. This is where empathy becomes a communication tool, Not empathy as a soft concept, but empathy as a practical act of understanding someone well enough to speak to where they actually are. When you understand what someone is afraid of, you don't lead with what makes you feel confident. You lead with what makes them feel understood. When you understand what someone is hoping to accomplish, you don't just present your perspective. You help them see how your perspective connects to theirs. Most people think about what they want to say. The communicators who actually move people think about what the person needs to hear. And that is not the same calculation. Here is where all of this connects. You have been in situations where communication failed you, where you said the wrong thing or nothing at all, where you walked away from a conversation feeling smaller than when you walked in, where you lost something or missed something because the words didn't work the way you needed them to. And the story you told yourself about those moments, in most cases, was a story about you, about a personal flaw, about being naturally bad at this, about not being one of those people who speaks well. But none of those things are actually true. What was true is that no one taught you the underlying structure. No one explained that communication is psychological before it is verbal, that your fear of judgment was running a program in the background of every important conversation, that you were performing listening instead of doing it, that silence was a tool you never learned to use, that your internal state was leaking into every room before you opened your mouth. These are learnable things, not overnight, not from a single video or a single book, but learnable. And the shift does not require becoming a different person. It requires understanding the person you already are more clearly, the fears, the patterns, the places where you protect yourself by going quiet or by over-explaining or by rushing past the important moments. When you can see those patterns, you are no longer at their mercy. You can make a different choice. Not every time, not perfectly, but more often, in the moments that matter. So here is the answer to what I asked at the beginning. Why do smart, capable, deeply aware people still struggle to be heard? Not because they lack words, not because they lack intelligence, but because they were focused on the output, the speaking, the performance, while the real work was happening inside, in the beliefs about whether their voice matters, in the fear driving the hesitation, in the performing of listening instead of the doing of it, in the rush to fill silence because the pause felt threatening. The change does not start with speaking differently. It starts with paying attention differently to what happens inside you just before you speak, to what you're actually hearing when someone else is talking, to the silence you're trying to escape and what that escape costs you. One real thing you can do, starting now, is to slow down by one beat before you respond in any conversation that matters to you. Not dramatically, just one beat. Enough to let what was said actually reach you before you begin formulating your reply. That single shift changes the quality of what you say, because you are no longer responding to what you thought they were going to say. You are responding to what they actually said. The second thing is harder, but more important. Start noticing the internal story you run before important conversations. The one that tells you this probably won't go well, or that your idea isn't strong enough, or that they won't really hear you anyway. That story is not insight. It is protection. And it is costing you real things in real conversations with real people. You don't have to eliminate it. You just have to stop treating it as information. The person you were at the beginning of this, sitting in that meeting or that conversation, carrying something you couldn't quite say, that was not a failure of intelligence. It was not a fixed limit. It was a pattern, one that formed over time, in specific conditions,
for specific reasons. Patterns can shift, not all at once, not without setbacks, but they shift. And when they do, it is not just that you speak better. It is that you start to feel like you are actually in your conversations, instead of observing them from a slight distance. That distance closes when you stop managing communication and start actually doing it, messy and real and present. That is when people start hearing you differently. Not because you found the right words, but because you were finally fully in the room. If this changed how you see things, the next one will probably be worth your time too.